Welcome to the channel Basic Strategy, where we get to talk about all things strategy. How did one man that was outnumbered, hated by his enemies, seriously hated, rise to become the master of Europe? That man was the legendary French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a military genius with so many ideas, but perhaps his most innovative solution to victory was the core system. Pay attention, because you might have heard structure follows strategy. But the inverse is also correct. Existing structure limits future strategy. That was the truth for the armies of Europe in the 1800s. Most battles were still done with large, centralized armies. Their system was dependent on key logistics and rigid command structures. The problem was that they were ineffective if supply routes became threatened or if communication was slow. Operationally, this meant wars were frequently decided by one main army meeting another. Napoleon broke this limitation by standardizing the corps system. Instead of high command deciding right before each campaign how to organize their army, in Napoleon's corps system, a corps was a permanent mini-army. Most corps had 20,000 to 30,000 troops that were comprised by infantry divisions, cavalry brigades, and 36 to 48 artillery guns, and most importantly, its own engineers and logistics. In Napoleon's Grand Army, there was around 5 to 8 corps used. All corps followed Napoleon's intent, not constant orders. This was a force that could march on its own, fight on its own for a short time, and hold ground until help arrived. Because each corps had its own logistics and lived off the land, Napoleon could spread his army out safely up to a one-day march apart, while other European armies had to stay concentrated. This gave him three decisive advantages. First, speed. Independent corps could cover more ground with multiple roads, far faster than a single massive army. Second, flexibility. Even when spread out, if one corps encountered the enemy, it could hold them in place. Other corps could then maneuver freely. Third, local superiority. Even when Napoleon was outnumbered overall, he could bring several corps together at one point, overwhelming part of the enemy army before the rest could react. Napoleon's most notable battles exhibited this system fully. At the Battle of Ulm in 1805, Napoleon knew the Russians were going to join up with the Austrian army, so his time was short. The Austrians believed that Napoleon would be coming from the west, as that would have been the quickest route to stop them, according to the old way of thinking. But because the corps took multiple roads and lived off the land, not needing slow, long supply lines, they were able to come in from the northeast. The Austrians were surprised by the speed, and before they knew it, surrounded with their supply lines and retreat routes cut off. It was a humiliating surrender of 60,000 and 10,000 casualties, compared to the 2 to 3,000 French lost. At Austerlitz, Napoleon faced a much larger army, 73,000 versus 90,000 Russians. The Third Corps, under legendary Marshal Davout, held a deliberately weak flank with orders to hold on as long as possible as bait, while others will charge and crush the enemy center using the fog as cover. French losses were 9,000 versus the Russians' 36,000. At Jena Austerlitz, Napoleon believed he was going to engage the main Prussian army at Jena. He ordered 2 corps to flank around. In reality, Napoleon's information was incorrect. The main Prussian force was repositioning earlier and accidentally met Marshal Davout's Third Corps. Heavily outnumbered 2 to 1, Davout was a great commander, and the Prussian army's leadership was pretty bad. Using the corps' combined armed force at his disposal, he used artillery to hit the weak spots, and cavalry for counterattacks. Better organized, better leadership, he absolutely destroyed the Prussians. French losses were 7,000, while the Prussians 13,000. These victories were not won through strength, but the results of organizational design. Napoleon did not win because he always had better plans. He won because his structure allowed good plans to operate. When making your strategies in anything, consider that some strategic limits aren't obstacles. They are products of structure. Change the structure and the limit changes. Napoleon understood this premise very well. This is Basic Strategy. Like and subscribe.